Hi, we are Richard and Jaci Mun-Gavin, and we love family and we believe in the value of parenting.
We understand that parenting is probably the hardest job that you've ever done and the most important job you've ever done. And so in today's session, we hope that the topic that we're going to cover is going to be helpful for you.
So welcome to session 4, and in this session we're going to be talking about mutual respect. We know that children are also created in the image of God, and so as fellow humans, we need to mutually respect one another. We know that children need to respect their parents. That's a given. And so that's not really the topic of this conversation for this session, but it's really the focus is on us as parents respecting our children as being helpful to our parenting.
Absolutely. I think it's important because socially, it's in society, it's accepted that children shouldn't interrupt when adults are talking, they should get up when an adult walks into the room, or whatever your particular culture says that children should do for their elders and for adults. But there seems to be a little bit of a lack of adults respecting children. There's been children's rights and it's been brought into the light, but I think this is really, for us, a topic that is quite important and close to our hearts, is that before anything, we are first all under God. That before we even start our parenting journey, there needs to be mutual respect in our home. So our last session was on an atmosphere of love, and this one is an atmosphere of mutual respect, where we are all respecting one another. We need to understand that as human beings, that children are people. We want to understand them as such. Children are not just, they don't just have potential, they don't just have possibility, that right now they already exist in personhood. There is something there already. There is a person there already, no matter how small, that has certain desires and certain interests and things that they're passionate about. They even are starting to develop their own boundaries. And as parents, we want to be so careful to allow those to develop and to allow our children to be respected in that way. I remember somebody was babysitting our kids a little while ago, and they came back to me and they said, "Oh, your eldest daughter has got such a sense of humor." And I remember thinking, really? I didn't know that about her. And it was so sad to me. And I realized, gosh, I'm lagging behind in knowing this child and in respecting them as an individual, as a person today, that I maybe have got so caught up in my busyness of my vision of where they're going and who I'm trying to create them to be and what we're doing on a daily basis with them, that I'm forgetting to actually know her today. And so our challenge today is to know your child today for who they are, to appreciate who they are, to understand them, to get down onto their level and to speak to them in a way that shows that you want to know them.
I think it's really important for us to know, when we're talking about this understanding of this concept of mutual respect, is that our children aren't balls and chain, or they're not a restriction on our purpose, but rather they're given to us as a gift by God. And so probably by extension, it's something of an extension of our purpose, but certainly it's a partnership with God in being able to develop another human being and take them on part of their journey. And that, when we get that as a basis, one of the bases of our parenting, you'll start to have an atmosphere of mutual respect in the home.
You're a pastor, love, and when you're pastoring a group of people, it doesn't mean that you get to put your will onto them. They get to still be who they are, but your job is to steward them and to help them into who they are. And so we have to be so careful as parents that we don't take ownership of our children, we don't take control over them, but that we actually are trying to discover who they are, trying to read that and respect them. I'd love to encourage you, if you don't already do this, to try and get down onto your child's level, particularly when they're young, but even teenagers. The way they think is just completely different. And so we so often just in our busyness go about our days and they follow along behind us, trying to keep up, trying to understand what's going on. But actually to slow down and to think, how does this feel from their perspective? In order to respect this person, I need to walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak. I need to go down to their level. I need to try and understand how the world looks like for them.
And yes, you're saying. And I think with that, it's also carries over to how we talk to them and how we allow them to talk to themselves, which I think is really, really important in terms of our mutual respect. And so as we understand that they're not just potential holders. There are people today, and yes, they have potential which we want to develop, and so we're not talking about that. There are people today, and yes, we want to get onto their level so we can start to understand them a little bit more. It is around how we talk to them. If we, I know that you've been really good at this, and I've certainly learned from it. I know many families have, but if we're always talking to our children like they are inferior or inconvenient or babies, if we don't treat them like people, they will respond accordingly. And so the way we talk to them in creating mutual respect is so important.
Absolutely. And what's also important is obviously for them, the way that they speak to each other in our home. We spoke about our home being an atmosphere of love, an atmosphere of beauty, somewhere where they can get healing from trauma as opposed to experience trauma. And I think so often parents write off the way that their kids speak to each other as, sibling rivalry, it's to be expected. But I want to challenge that notion and say it's not to be expected. Why are they rivals? They're not rivals. They're in the same team. They're there to develop each other and to love each other. I'm not saying that our kids never argue and that they never fight at all. Of course, I mean, as married couples, we rub off on each other. The natural thing of making a stone smooth means we're rubbing part of each other off. It's hard. Iron sharpening iron, we're rubbing part of each other off. It's not pleasant. It can be very difficult. It can be very confrontational. But it doesn't have to be disrespectful. And I think that's my point, is the kids, as they learn their own boundaries, they're going to say, hey, hang on a second, you're in my space. And actually, I'm pretty sure this is my space at the dining room table and you're in it. And they're going to fight for those things. That's okay. But it's not sibling rivalry. They're not in competition for our attention. They're not in competition for who is better than the other. They must be able to celebrate each other. And we want to always be encouraging that they are able to celebrate each other, that they belong to each other, that there is a joy there, and that they always respect one another. God requires this of us as a church. He does not tolerate his children fighting. He doesn't tolerate his children treating each other badly. And I think for me, that's why it's so important that in our own homes, we also don't tolerate our children disrespecting each other. I think
one of the things that you have said previously is that we're not in competition, we're partners. And as that would be the case in the church, where we are partners and we've got different skill sets and different gifts, and different graces, so in our family, so with our children, we like that. And if we can teach them to partner together as opposed to compete with one another, to co-labor together as opposed to be rivals, that again creates an atmosphere of mutual respect in the home. What an atmosphere of mutual respect does do is it does limit the way we can lead our kids to maturity. It gives us some limitations, it gives us some parameters. And I know that this is something that you are really passionate about. You've come to really invest yourself in the way that you raise, you share your side of raising our kids. And so maybe just take us through some of those things.
Sure, absolutely. I think that what I feel is that our children, we call them our children, and so sometimes we can be mistaken in thinking that they belong to us. They're our children, they belong to us. But they're our relation, not our possession, any more than our aunt belongs to us. We have a relationship with them. They relate to us in a very specific way. They are our dependents, which makes it a little bit more complicated. And it makes the onus on us to be a little bit more careful. But actually, they're our relation, not our possession. And so we're limited. We're very limited, in fact, in what we can do in order to secure an outcome, in order to get to that vision that we had, that we spoke about in the second session. And so first of all, I want to just actually speak about our limitations. What can we not do? First of all, we can't use fear. We can't intimidate them into obedience. We can't intimidate them into becoming the people that we're wanting them to do. So this is obviously shouting, losing control, making them afraid of us. It's a very common tactic as parents, because we feel out of control and we want to control our children. We want them to get to what, even if it's because we love them, we want to secure an outcome. We want to get them to a certain place, but that's not okay. We don't get to use fear to manipulate them.
And it goes completely against what we've just spoken around the previous session, around an atmosphere of love, because perfect love drives out fear. And so atmosphere of love and using fear as a tool can just never go hand in hand.
It can't. And my next point, funnily enough, you might laugh at this, is actually we can't use love. We can't use love as a tool.
Yeah.
So although we want to create an atmosphere of love, just as we can't use fear, we can't use love as a manipulation tool. And by that I mean, because you love me, I really want you to do ballet. Because mommy loves ballet, etc., or whatever. You don't get to manipulate them into decisions that are really theirs to make. There are things that are right and wrong that we can insist upon, but we don't get to manipulate them into our own opinion. You don't get to manipulate them to follow the Sharks rugby team. I'm sorry.
We're not quite in agreement on this, but we're working on it.
Our children need to be free to vote for who they want to vote for, to follow who they want to follow in football and rugby and whatever, and to become who it is that God meant them to be. But we get to find that and discover that and lead that. We actually don't get to dictate that.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that's what I mean, fear and love. But then, and this might step on a few toes, we're also limited. If we truly respect our children as people, we can't use the tool of bribery. Bribery is a no-no. We've heard that, and there's a lot of argument about what is bribery and what is reward, because we know reward is good. We're allowed to reward, we're not allowed to bribe. And so what I say this phrase to myself a lot: what you draw them with, you draw them to.
Yeah.
So if you are drawing your children with television at the end of the week, if they do this and this and this, then that is their goal. Their goal is always what you're drawing them with, and that becomes what you're manipulating them towards. And so that becomes the focus of their identity and their energy and their efforts. And so you're actually undermining them as a person. You're undermining the very thing that you're trying to create. You're trying to create, in this example, a love for learning. But what you're actually creating is a distaste for learning and a love for television, for example. And so that's why bribery is not okay. Reward is different, because reward says, if you do this hard work, this is what you get. So for example, our son Sam, he is desperate to be an engineer. He has got his heart set on it. At any given moment, he's taken Richard's tools and lost them through the garden, taken apart a computer or something that he really shouldn't have done, and he's trying to figure out how it works. So now with Sam, I can use the reward of, if you do this maths, which he doesn't enjoy, he struggles with it, it's difficult, then I can get you into engineering. I can get you to your life goal. And so I bring the reward closer so that they can understand it. So I can bring it into their reach, into their understanding, but not with bribery. Not if you do your maths, I'll give you a sweet. And my goal is engineering. If my goal for him is engineering because he wants it, then I must use that. Use the reward. Use the true thing that he's going for. What you draw them with, you draw them to. And then the fourth limitation we have is competition. We actually can't use competition, and I know it's tempting. I'm tempted myself on a daily basis. This one's doing it, so you do it, or try and do it better than this person. If we use competition with our children, again, that's what they strive to, and they think that something is not worth doing unless they're going to win at it. And that's, again, not preparing them for real life. In real life, if you're not the best at something, it doesn't mean you can get you not do it. You still have to do it.
If you don't earn the biggest salary, it doesn't mean that you just stop working and tap out.
Exactly. And so we are somewhat limited in the methods that we can use to teach our children. If we're going to respect them as people, and we don't want to undermine their characters, we don't want to undermine what we're building by taking shortcuts in what we're building.
So then the question obviously remains, well, how can we secure their outcome? How can we secure what we desire for them in this atmosphere of mutual respect?
Absolutely. And the trouble is, we actually can't secure it. And I think that is what is, you might be going, what kind of parenting course is this? But the truth is that we cannot be completely sure of what our children will become, because in the last session we spoke about an atmosphere of love is generous enough to give self-determination and to give free will. God has given us a free will, and our children have the right to decide whether or not they are going to reach the dreams and goals that we have for them. But there are ways, obviously, and that's what we're going to be speaking a little bit more of in the next few sessions. But the first, I'm going to give you 3 ways now, so you don't have to wait. The first one is the atmosphere we create. We create an atmosphere of love and of respect, but an atmosphere, a heavenly atmosphere where people are free, where our children are free to experiment, to try on different personalities and different skills. They're free to do things with grace. They're swimming in grace in our home, if you like. And so they can try different things and make mistakes and figure out different ways. So the first thing is the atmosphere you create that allows them to mess up and come back anyway, and to make bad choices and try again. That atmosphere is key.
Yeah. Just before you get on to the second and the third one, there's a story of our teenage daughter. One of our teenage daughters came through one day wearing some interesting clothes. And as a dad, I kind of raised my eyebrows, and Jax was very quick to come and stand alongside me and said, "She's trying this on today. So we don't have to pass comments. She's just trying it on." And very gratefully, that was no longer an outfit, and I didn't have to say anything. But we could have put pressure on a relationship there.
Absolutely.
But there was an atmosphere of heaven. You are free to try and discover who you are, and if that means wearing jeans with holes all the way through them, then wear them.
She wasn't dressed inappropriately,
yes,
but she was dressed completely unfashionably. So she was not making us look cool, which it should be the other way around. So an atmosphere where you can try on new things. And then routine and habits. Habits, we're doing a whole session on habits coming up. Habits is key. We want to put in godly habits. And so that training we're speaking about in session 2 of the vision that we have for them and what habits are you working on, and the kids know what habits. We'll speak about that a little bit later in more detail. But habits and routines are your friend, and we're going to work with those as well. And then the final one was actually ideas, stimulus of great ideas. We want to inspire them, and that is what God has done for us. He gives us beautiful ideas, beautiful stories, and in those beautiful stories we then realize what we want to be. We're shown a picture of what we want to be. God gives us grace, He teaches us routines, He gives us good disciplines to go on, and He shows us what we can become, and that's what we want to do for our children. A little story about our boy Jed. We had our oldest boy had an incredible level of self-determination, let's call it that. He stubbornness, for those who are wondering what I mean. He was completely stubborn. As a little baby, he was probably 2 years old, saying ta for his food. He refused to say ta for his food, like ta, that's how we would say please in our house. He just said no, and I refused to give it to him because I had asked him for it, and we had this battle of the wills, and as it turns out, his was a lot stronger than me because he lasted, I'm ashamed to say, 3 or 4 meals without eating because he wouldn't say ta. And he knew exactly what I was asking. I finally gave in after 3 or 4 meals, and I didn't ask him not to say ta, I just gave him his food, and he looked at me and said, ta. Great, I won. To this day, he's exactly the same child. He is extremely strong-willed, but as we started reading Bible stories to him, particularly David, and just heroic stories, and as he saw what he could become, that very self-determination, that will that is a gift to him really, actually has set him on a course of the kind of man that he wants to become, and he is turning into an incredible gentleman. Even from that young age, he started to make decisions about, I want to carry your handbag, mommy, and just little things of what it meant to be a hero. And so those are the 3 ways that we have. We want to create an atmosphere where our kids are free to make mistakes, free to try again, that they feel that they're loved and they're safe, that we are going to use routine and habits, and we're going to talk about how that will help you as you put your kids into routine so that they don't have decision fatigue, as you mentioned, that they know they don't have to keep deciding whether or not they're going to be obedient in a situation, and then finally that we're going to continue to bring beautiful ideas, history stories, Bible stories, heroes in our midst, in our communities before them, so that they have something great to aspire to.
So the takeaway from this session is mutual respect, that our children are people themselves, not just with future potential, but they're real people today.
Yes.
And to get the best out of what God has designed us for as a family, there has to be mutual respect, them to us and us to them.